The little black girl hid beside a fallen billboard as someone whispered her name from the empty highway. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. On a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, a little black girl was hiding, crouched beside a fallen billboard. The night was cold, and the air was thick with the scent of rain. She had been running for what felt like forever, her small body trembling in fear. She could hear the distant hum of a car engine, its headlights cutting through the darkness. But it wasn't just the sound that froze her to the core. It was the voice, the whisper that drifted through the night, soft yet chilling, like a warning carried on the wind. I know you're out there, it said, her name spoken like a secret. The girl's heart pounded in her chest as she held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the shadows of the fallen billboard. She had no idea who it was or how they knew her, but the sound of that voice sent a shiver down her spine. She couldn't see anyone, but she knew she wasn't alone. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The soft rustling of the trees in the wind was the only thing breaking the eerie silence. The girl, barely 10 years old, had no choice but to remain hidden. She had been running from something terrible, something that had followed her since she first stepped out of her house. Her parents? They weren't in the picture anymore. Her mother had left when she was just a toddler, and her father, well, he hadn't been the father she wished for. She had tried to reach out to others, but they had all turned their backs. She had no one to turn to, except for the road ahead, which now seemed more like a trap than a path to freedom. The whisper called again, this time a little louder, a little more insistent. Come out, little one. I know where you are. Panic surged in her chest. Was it the man she had seen earlier? Or someone else? She couldn't take the risk. She had to stay hidden, no matter what. As she crouched in the cold dirt, her thoughts raced. What should she do? Was there anyone out there who could help her? She wasn't sure how much longer she could stay hidden in the dark, all alone on that empty highway. The whisper grew louder, closer, and then, just as she thought she would be discovered, she heard something else. The low rumble of motorcycles in the distance, their engines roaring like thunder, growing louder with each passing second. The girl's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Were they coming for her? She dared not move, not even to glance in the direction of the approaching sound. But as the motorcycles drew nearer, she realized it wasn't just one or two. There were dozens of them. Dozens of bikers, roaring down the highway like a storm. She felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her chest. Could they be the ones to save her? Could these strangers be the answer she had been searching for? As the bikes grew closer, the whisper in the wind fell silent. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Was this her chance? Was help finally arriving? Or was she about to be caught in something far worse? The sound of roaring engines grew louder as the bikes neared, shaking the ground beneath her. The little girl's heart raced, and for the first time in hours, she dared to hope. She didn't know who these riders were, but their arrival felt like a miracle. She pressed herself further into the shadows, barely breathing, waiting for them to pass by. But instead of speeding past, the motorcycles slowed, and one by one, they turned off the highway and into the dirt path she had been hiding beside. The thunderous sound of their engines faded into a deep, mechanical rumble, like distant thunder, as the bikers parked their bikes in formation, their faces hidden beneath helmets. She could hear the unmistakable sound of boots crunching against the gravel, the low voices of men talking to each other, their presence undeniable and powerful. Her stomach twisted in fear, but there was something else, something that felt different this time. The dread that had gripped her earlier was now mixed with a fragile, growing sense of safety. She clenched her fists tightly and tried to control her breath, praying that they wouldn't spot her. The bikers weren't just ordinary riders. These men carried an air of authority, of strength. They were no strangers to danger. She could feel it in the way they moved, with a quiet intensity, like predators on alert. One of them, a tall man with a scar on his face, stepped forward. His voice was low, gruff, but firm. Stay close, he ordered to the others. His eyes scanned the area, the cold light from the bike headlights catching his sharp features. His gaze flicked over the fallen billboard, and for a moment, he stopped, seemingly searching for something. Then, his voice again. "She's here. I can feel it." The other bikers began to spread out, checking the perimeter, each man focused on the task at hand. The little girl's pulse quickened as the man with the scar turned in her direction. Her breath hitched, and she froze, praying they wouldn't see her. But the man didn't move toward her. Instead, he glanced around once more, his eyes landing on the fallen billboard. He approached it slowly, methodically, as though he were familiar with this kind of situation. "She's hiding," he muttered under his breath. "She's scared." The other bikers followed his lead, moving in sync with a calm precision that spoke volumes about their experience. They were not here to cause harm. They were here to help. The little girl felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her chest. She could hear the man's boots crunching closer, but still, she didn't move. She couldn't. She had been taught her whole life to be careful, to trust no one, to hide from the world. But these men, with their steady movements and quiet commands, didn't feel like a threat. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wondered if there was a chance they could protect her. The man with the scar stopped just inches from the fallen billboard. He crouched down, and his voice softened. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." His words, though spoken quietly, cut through the air with a sense of reassurance that seemed to reach her. She didn't know why, but something about the way he spoke, the calmness in his voice, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. After a long pause, she finally gathered the courage to step out from behind the billboard. Her small frame was shaking, but she stood tall enough for the man to see her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "help me." The man's eyes softened as he stood up, his hand extending toward her. "We're here," he said, his voice gentle but unwavering. "You're safe now." The little girl took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was standing right in front of him. The moment her hand touched his, she felt a wave of warmth and comfort spread through her. It was as if the darkness she had been living in for so long was finally starting to lift. "What's your name, sweetheart?" the man asked, his voice still calm, as if he wasn't rushing anything. "Maya," she said softly, her eyes never leaving his. "Maya," he repeated, a slight smile breaking through the hardness of his features. "You're safe now, Maya. We've got you." The other bikers gathered around, forming a protective circle. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were her protectors, and she was no longer alone. Maya stood in the protective circle formed by the bikers, her small body still trembling, but her mind was racing. She couldn't believe it. For the first time in days, she felt safe. The weight of the fear that had gripped her for so long seemed to lighten, even if just a little. She glanced up at the man with the scar, the one who had spoken to her so kindly, and saw the determination in his eyes. This wasn't just some random act of kindness. These bikers weren't here by accident. They had come for her, and they weren't leaving until she was safe. The man's name was Jack. He had introduced himself when Maya had reached out for help. He was the leader of this group of bikers, a man with a past as deep and as rugged as the leather jacket he wore. But now, he wasn't thinking about the past. He was focused on one thing: keeping Maya safe. "Let's get moving," Jack said, his voice steady. "We don't have time to waste." The other bikers, still wearing their helmets, nodded in agreement. They had been trained for moments like this, though none of them ever expected to find themselves in a situation like this one. As they mounted their bikes, the sound of engines roaring to life filled the air, and Maya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline flood her body. The fear hadn't completely disappeared, but there was something reassuring about the growl of the motorcycles. It was like they were going to war, but this time, they were fighting for her. They rode in formation, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. The journey ahead was long, and the road was dangerous, but Maya knew she wasn't alone anymore. As they sped down the empty highway, the man with the scar, Jack, stayed close to her. He had noticed the bruises on her arms, the marks of someone who had been through far too much for someone so young. She hadn't wanted to talk about it, but Jack could see it in her eyes. She had been running from something, someone, and now she was safe, for now. As they drove on, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The road seemed too quiet, too still, and the shadow of a silver SUV had been hanging over him since the moment they had left the spot where they found Maya. He looked over his shoulder, checking the rearview mirror, but all he saw was the dust they had kicked up from the dirt road. "We've got to make it to town before morning," Jack said, his voice low. "We'll be safe there. They won't find us in the city." Maya didn't respond, but Jack could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She was still processing everything that had happened. Her mind was racing, and she wasn't sure if she could trust these strangers, these bikers, who had suddenly appeared in her life. But there was something about them, something that made her feel like, for the first time in a long time, there was hope. The motorcycles roared down the highway, their engines vibrating beneath them as they tore through the night. The wind whipped past Maya's face, and for the first time in days, she felt the sting of it, felt alive. They were moving fast, but there was still so much unknown. They didn't know who was after her or why. All they knew was that they had to get her to safety. Jack kept his eyes on the road, the others following closely behind. He knew that if the man who had been chasing her caught up, it wouldn't be just a fight. It would be a battle. And they weren't the kind of men to back down from a fight. As they pushed further down the road, Jack finally broke the silence. "Maya," he said gently, "you can tell me what's going on. You're safe now." Maya stayed silent for a moment, the words stuck in her throat. She wasn't sure if she could trust them. She didn't know what they would do with the truth. But deep down, she knew that she had to speak. She had to say something. I'm running from my stepdad," Maya whispered, her voice shaky. Jack's expression darkened, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded, his face hardening with anger. He could see the pain in her eyes. "What did he do to you?" Jack asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya looked down at her hands, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to steady her breathing. He hurt me," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to run away before, but he always found me. I thought he was going to kill me." Jack's grip on the handlebars tightened. He didn't say anything, but the anger burning inside him was clear. No one hurt a child like that. Not on his watch. "You don't have to worry about him anymore," Jack said, his voice thick with conviction. "We'll protect you, Maya. You're with us now. Your family." Maya finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. She saw the sincerity in his face, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe it. Maybe she had found a place where she was safe. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new life. One where she wouldn't have to hide anymore. The roar of the motorcycles continued to echo through the dark highway, their engines cutting through the silence of the night. Jack kept his eyes focused on the road, the headlights illuminating the path ahead as they raced toward the distant lights of the town. Maya, still sitting behind him, held on tightly, her small hands gripping his leather jacket as they sped through the night. She could feel the wind whipping against her face, but for the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't a feeling of fear. It was freedom. As they drew closer to the town, Jack knew they had to be careful. The man who had been chasing Maya wasn't someone to underestimate. He was dangerous, and he would stop at nothing to find her. Jack had a feeling they were being watched, but for now, the road ahead seemed clear. They passed a few small towns along the way, but none of them were far enough to give Jack the peace of mind they needed. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning for any signs of trouble. "We're getting close," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. "Stay alert. We'll make it to the safe house soon." Maya nodded silently, her mind still racing. She hadn't spoken much since she confided in Jack about her stepdad. It was hard to put everything into words, hard to explain how it felt to be constantly running, always looking over her shoulder. But now, with Jack and his crew around her, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could stop running. As they neared the outskirts of town, Jack made a sharp turn onto a dirt road that led toward a small, secluded cabin. The place was tucked away from the main road, hidden from view by the trees surrounding it. This was the safe house, a place where Jack and his crew had taken refuge in the past. It was far off the beaten path, and there was no way anyone would find it unless they knew exactly where to look. Jack slowed the bike as they approached the cabin, turning off the engine as they came to a stop. The rest of the bikers pulled in behind them, parking their bikes in a neat row. Maya looked around, taking in her new surroundings. The cabin was small, but it felt warm and welcoming. The lights inside were dim, casting a soft glow through the windows. It was peaceful here, nothing like the chaos she had left behind. Jack climbed off the bike, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He turned to Maya, offering her his hand. "Welcome. he said with a reassuring smile. This is your home for now. Maya hesitated for a moment before slowly taking his hand and climbing off the bike. She looked around at the other bikers, who were all watching her with kind eyes. It was strange, seeing people like them, tough, weathered, and covered in tattoos, looking at her with such care. They weren't the kind of people she had ever expected to trust. But here, now, in this moment, she knew they weren't going to hurt her. She didn't know how long it would take for the fear to go away, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she was starting to believe that she could have a future. Jack led her inside the cabin, where the rest of the crew was already gathering. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and something savory cooking on the stove. It felt normal. It felt safe. One of the bikers, a woman with short, dark hair and a stern face, was at the kitchen counter, stirring something in a pot. She glanced up as they entered and gave Maya a quick smile before returning to her task. Dinner's almost ready, the woman said. You hungry? Maya nodded, the knot in her stomach loosening just a bit. She hadn't eaten much since she had been on the run, and the smell of food made her realize just how hungry she really was. Jack turned to Maya, his expression softening. Sit down, he said gently. You're safe here. Eat, rest, and we'll talk more in the morning. You don't have to worry about anything tonight. Maya nodded again, feeling a weight she didn't realize she had been carrying slowly lifting from her shoulders. She sat down at the small table in the corner of the room, her eyes scanning the cabin. It was small, but cozy, nothing fancy, but everything she needed. She hadn't had a place like this in so long. It felt like a dream. As they ate, the bikers spoke in low voices, discussing their plans for the next few days. Maya didn't understand everything they were saying, but she could tell that they were focused. They were planning. They were preparing. They weren't going to let anything happen to her. The thought brought a strange comfort to her heart. As the meal came to an end, Jack stood up and walked over to Maya. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but firm. Get some rest, Maya. We've got a long road ahead of us, but you're not alone anymore. Maya looked up at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. For the first time in days, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The morning light broke through the cracks in the wooden shutters, casting long, quiet shadows across the small cabin. Maya woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside, a stark contrast to the nightmares she had been having for days. The warmth of the blanket around her felt comforting, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. She was safe, at least for now. The cabin was still, except for the faint sounds of the bikers preparing breakfast. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee reached her nose, making her stomach growl. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now. She slowly sat up, her muscles stiff from the long ride the night before, but the pain was nothing compared to the weight that had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't on the run anymore. She wasn't alone. As she stretched, she heard footsteps outside the room, and Jack appeared in the doorway. He had a gentle smile on his face, one that softened the hard lines of his face. Morning, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. How are you feeling? Maya shrugged, still unsure of how to put her emotions into words. She had never been the kind of person to open up easily, but there was something about Jack and the others that made her feel like maybe she could. Better, she replied quietly, her voice hoarse from the night's sleep. Good. Jack nodded, then motioned toward the kitchen. We've got breakfast ready. Come on, let's get you something to eat. Maya hesitated for a moment, but then she followed Jack into the small kitchen. The bikers were already sitting at the table, laughing and joking, their voices loud and easy, the kind of warmth that made the room feel like a home. As she walked in, they all paused and looked at her. One of the bikers, a woman with short dark hair and a smile that could light up the room, waved her over. Hey, there's room for you here, the woman said, patting the seat next to her. Maya smiled shyly and took the seat, feeling the weight of their welcoming gaze. The food was simple but hearty, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh coffee. It wasn't much, but for Maya, it felt like a feast. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, not wanting to rush the comfort she was feeling. As she ate, the bikers continued to talk, their conversation casual, but Maya couldn't help but overhear their plans. Jack was talking to the woman next to her, who was named Roxy, about the next steps. We'll need to keep moving today. Jack said, his tone serious. We can't afford to stay in one place for too long. Maya's stepdad won't stop looking for her. Roxy nodded, her face hardening at the mention of Maya's stepdad. We've got connections in town, she said, her voice low. We can get some information, make sure he's not onto us. Maya felt a pang of fear at the mention of her stepdad. The thought of him still out there, looking for her, made her chest tighten. But as she looked around the room, at the bikers who were already planning to protect her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. Maya, we're not going to let anything happen to you. You're with us now. We'll take care of everything. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She wasn't sure how they could protect her from someone like her stepdad, but she trusted them. She trusted Jack. Thank you, she whispered. Jack gave her a reassuring smile, then stood up and looked at the rest of the crew. All right, let's finish up here. We've got work to do. The bikers all nodded, standing up from the table and gathering their gear. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from warmth to focus. It was time to move. Maya watched them, feeling a surge of determination rise in her chest. She had been running for so long, but now, she had people who cared about her. People who were willing to fight for her. She wasn't going to let her stepdad win. She wasn't going to be afraid anymore. As the bikers finished getting ready, Jack approached Maya, offering her a jacket to wear. She took it, feeling the weight of the leather in her hands. It was warm, it smelled of the road and adventure, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like a shield. You're part of the crew now, Maya, Jack said, his voice firm but kind. And we look out for each other. No one's going to hurt you again. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. She wasn't alone. She wasn't running anymore. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she had a family. The sun was setting as the bikers rolled down the dirt road toward the edge of the small town. The air was thick with the scent of pine trees, and the sound of their engines filled the night sky. Jack led the way, his bike rumbling as he steered the group toward their destination. Maya sat behind him, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist. She had never felt more nervous in her life, but she knew she had to stay strong. She was far from the safety of the cabin, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see her stepdad's car creeping up behind them. She had been on the run for so long. It felt like the danger was always right behind her. But Jack had promised her she was safe, and she believed him. As they entered the town, the streets were empty, the small businesses closed for the night. The sound of their motorcycles echoed off the old brick buildings, making the whole place feel deserted. They passed a few streetlights, their dim glow casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Maya's heart was racing as they pulled into a small parking lot behind a dilapidated building. The bikers parked their bikes in a neat row, and Jack climbed off, his boots hitting the ground with a thud. Stay close, he said to Maya, his voice low. She nodded, sliding off the bike and following him toward the building. It was an old warehouse, its windows boarded up and the door rusted shut. The building looked abandoned, but Jack had a plan. He knocked on the back door, and after a few seconds, it creaked open. Inside, the air was musty, the smell of old wood and dust filling Maya's nostrils. Jack motioned for her to stay behind him as he stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, and there were several people inside, men and women, all wearing leather jackets like the bikers. They were sitting around a table, talking in low voices. One of them, a man with a thick beard and tattoos covering his arms, stood up when he saw Jack. You made it, the man said with a smile. Jack nodded. We're here for the information, he said, his tone serious. The man nodded and gestured for them to follow him. He led them to a small office in the back of the warehouse, where a map of the town was spread out on the desk. There were several red marks on the map, indicating key locations. We've been keeping an eye on Maya's stepdad, the man said, his voice low. He's been asking around, trying to find her. We've got a good idea of where he's hiding. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the map. Her stepdad's name was written next to one of the marks. She had no idea how he had tracked her this far, but she knew she couldn't keep running forever. Jack stood next to her, his presence reassuring, as the man continued to explain their plan. We're going to make sure he doesn't get any closer, the man said. We've got some friends on the inside. We'll make sure he knows we're watching him. Jack nodded, his expression hard. Good. We don't have much time. Maya felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to say something, to thank them for everything they had done, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just stood there, absorbing the plan. She had never thought she would be in a situation like this, surrounded by people who cared about her, ready to fight for her. It felt surreal. As the meeting continued, the bikers made their plans. Jack and the others would stay in the area and watch for any signs of Maya's stepdad. They would move quickly, making sure they stayed one step ahead of him. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Maya's mind was racing. She had been running for so long, and now, for the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger. The fear she had carried with her for so long started to fade. Maybe there was hope for her after all. As the meeting concluded, Jack turned to Maya, his expression softening. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice firm yet comforting. "We've got you. You're not alone anymore." Maya nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. She didn't know how they had managed to get involved in her life, but she was grateful. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a chance at something better. The bikers finished gathering their things, and Jack motioned for Maya to follow him. They headed out of the warehouse and back to the bikes, the sound of the engines once again filling the night air. As they mounted their bikes, Jack turned to her and gave her a reassuring nod. "Ready?" he asked. Maya looked up at him and nodded. "Ready," she whispered. The bikers revved their engines and rode out of the parking lot, heading toward their next move. Maya held on tightly to Jack as they sped down the empty streets. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting back, and with the bikers by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The morning sun was just starting to rise, casting a warm orange glow across the sky as Jack and the other bikers gathered around their bikes, preparing for what lay ahead. The small town they had passed through the night before was still asleep, its streets empty and quiet. Maya stood beside Jack, the weight of the plan they had laid out the night before pressing heavily on her shoulders. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about fighting back. The fear that had plagued her for so long hadn't completely gone away, but it was different now. She wasn't alone. The bikers were with her, and together, they were ready to face whatever her stepdad had in store. "We'll leave before sunrise," Jack said, his voice steady as he checked his bike one last time. "We need to stay ahead of him, keep moving, and stay smart. We'll head north toward the mountains. The roads there are less traveled, and we can lose him in the hills." Maya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The thought of facing her stepdad again made her stomach twist in knots, but she knew there was no turning back now. The bikers were already loading up their gear, checking their weapons, and making sure everything was ready. She couldn't help but notice the calm efficiency with which they worked. It was clear they were no strangers to danger. For them, this wasn't just about saving one person, it was about taking a stand. "You ready, kid?" Roxy asked, stepping up beside Maya. Roxy was the one who had welcomed her into their circle, the one who had offered her a smile when she had felt like everything was falling apart. Roxy's presence had become a quiet reassurance to Maya, someone she could lean on in the midst of the chaos. Maya forced a small smile. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll make sure you're safe," Roxy said, her voice firm with conviction. "You've got a whole crew behind you, Maya. Don't forget that." Maya nodded again, feeling the weight of Roxy's words settle in her chest. She wasn't just some runaway girl anymore. She was part of something bigger. She was part of a family. Jack walked over to where Maya stood, his eyes scanning the horizon as he took a deep breath. "We've got a long ride ahead of us," he said. "But we'll make it. We've got the advantage now. He doesn't know where we're going, and we know where he's been." Maya felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in days, she felt like maybe they could win. Maybe they could stop running. She looked around at the bikers, each one of them ready for whatever was coming next. There was a quiet strength about them, a bond that was hard to describe but impossible to ignore. These weren't just bikers, they were warriors. And they had come for her. As they mounted their bikes and started up the engines, the low rumble of their machines filled the air. Maya climbed onto Jack's bike once more, gripping the sides of his jacket as the wind picked up. The other bikers revved their engines, ready to follow Jack's lead. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Maya wasn't afraid. The journey was just beginning, and they were ready. As they rode down the empty streets, Jack led the group toward the edge of town, the cool morning air rushing past them. The sun was just beginning to break through the trees as they left the small town behind, heading toward the mountains. Jack glanced over his shoulder to make sure the others were following, then turned his attention back to the road. Maya could feel the vibrations of the bike beneath her as they sped down the highway. She looked ahead, her heart beating in her chest. She didn't know what was waiting for them in the mountains, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to face it alone. As the group rode into the hills, the landscape started to change. The wide, open roads turned into winding mountain paths, surrounded by thick trees and steep cliffs. The air felt thinner, and the sound of the motorcycles reverberated off the rocks. Maya had never been this far from home before, but somehow, it felt like the right place to be. She couldn't explain it, but something in the air made her feel like she was heading in the right direction. The group stopped for a moment to catch their breath, the engines humming softly as the bikers gathered in a circle. Jack took a long, slow look around, his eyes scanning the mountain peaks in the distance. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low. "The longer we stay in one place, the more chances he has to catch up. We'll ride until we reach the next checkpoint." Maya nodded, her hands still gripping Jack's jacket. She was scared, but she wasn't alone. She had a family now, people who would protect her, who would fight for her. And no matter what her stepdad did, she wasn't going to let him win. As they set off again, the winding road leading them deeper into the mountains, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. It was fleeting, but it was there. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting back. And with Jack and the rest of the bikers by her side, she knew she had a chance to finally stop running for good. The mountains loomed tall ahead, their jagged peaks cutting through the pale morning sky. The air was crisp and thin, and the path had become steeper, winding through thick forests and rocky terrain. The roar of the bikes filled the space between the towering trees, their engines a constant hum against the backdrop of nature's stillness. Maya held on tighter to Jack, her mind still racing as they navigated the winding road. She had never felt more alive, but the fear was still there, lingering in the back of her mind. Every twist of the road felt like another step away from the life she had known, and the thought of her stepdad still haunted her. She hadn't heard from him since they left the cabin, but something told her that he wouldn't stop until he found her. The journey to the mountains felt like a temporary escape, but Maya knew it wasn't the end. They were just running out of time. The bikers had made it clear they were planning to take a stand, to confront whatever threat her stepdad posed, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still closing in. As they rode deeper into the mountains, Jack occasionally glanced at his rearview mirror, keeping a watchful eye on the road behind them. He was the leader of the group, the one who had made sure Maya's safety was the priority. He had become her protector, the person she now trusted more than anyone else. His calm demeanor had been a lifeline for her, and though she still had her doubts, there was something about the way he carried himself that made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. "We're almost there," Jack said, his voice steady but low, as the group slowed their pace and came to a stop in a small clearing. The tall trees around them created a natural barrier, and the bikes were parked in a neat row, their engines turning off one by one. "Everyone stay sharp," Jack added, looking around the group. "We can't afford to get careless. Maya's stepdad won't stop looking for her, and we need to stay one step ahead." The other bikers nodded, their expressions serious, as they began to dismount their bikes and gather around Jack. Maya followed closely behind Jack, feeling the weight of their mission settle in. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew this was their only chance to finally stop running. As they gathered around, Jack turned to Maya and gave her a reassuring nod. "We'll stay here for a while. We've got the advantage of the terrain," he said, motioning to the mountains around them. "This is as safe as we're going to get for now." Maya nodded, though the tension in her chest didn't completely ease. The bikers began setting up camp, unloading their gear, and preparing for what they might have to face next. As they worked, Jack stayed close to Maya, offering her the safety of his presence. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope at the way they all worked together, so calmly, so efficiently. This wasn't the chaotic, dangerous life she had known before. This was different. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky above them turned from blue to purple, and the stars began to shine through the gaps in the trees. The campfire crackled in the center of their gathering, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the bikers. Maya sat on a log, her eyes fixed on the fire, her mind racing. She still couldn't believe how much had changed in the past few days. She had gone from a terrified runaway, alone and vulnerable, to someone who was now part of something bigger, part of a family of bikers who had sworn to protect her. As the firelight danced on the ground, Roxy, the biker woman who had been so kind to Maya, came over and sat beside her. "You okay?" Roxy asked, her voice gentle but full of concern. Maya nodded, though the weight in her chest had not fully lifted. "I think so," she said quietly. "It's just hard to believe this is really happening. I've been running for so long, and now I'm supposed to be safe." Roxy smiled softly. "You're safe now, Maya. You're with us. We've got your back. Nobody's getting to you." Maya looked up at Roxy, feeling a surge of gratitude. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Roxy gave her a small nod. "We're a family now, and no one hurts family." As the night wore on, the bikers sat around the fire, talking in low voices, sharing stories of their travels, of their lives on the road. It was the kind of peaceful moment that Maya had never known before. She had never felt so accepted, so protected. And though the fear of her stepdad still lingered, it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been. She wasn't facing it alone anymore. Jack had been right. This was her family now. And no matter what happened, they would fight for her. The fire crackled, sending sparks up into the night air, and Maya leaned back against a nearby tree, her body tired but her mind at ease. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of the world slip off her shoulders. Tomorrow would come with new challenges, but for tonight, she allowed herself a moment of peace. The morning air was thick with tension as the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, casting long shadows over the camp. Maya stood by the edge of the clearing, her heart pounding in her chest. The past few days had been a whirlwind of fear, uncertainty, and fleeting moments of safety, but now the reality of what they were about to face hit her all at once. Jack had been planning for this moment, but she wasn't sure if she was ready. She had spent so long running, hiding, and living in fear that facing her stepdad felt like a battle she wasn't sure she could win. But as she looked around at the bikers, preparing for the journey ahead, she felt a glimmer of strength. She wasn't alone anymore. Jack walked over to her, his eyes scanning the horizon, his expression hard but reassuring. "We've got a plan," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "We're heading to the old church on the hill. It's the perfect place to make a stand. We'll have cover, and we'll be able to see anyone approaching." Maya nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. The church on the hill had been abandoned for years, but it was the perfect spot for what they needed. It was isolated and hidden, but still close enough to the town where they could catch anyone trying to track them down. Jack gave her a knowing look, as though he could sense her unease. "We'll make it, Maya. You're not alone in this." Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. She had come so far, and now, with the bikers by her side, she felt a sense of purpose that she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting back. Jack turned to the others, giving a sharp command to the group. "Let's get moving," he said. "Stay close. No mistakes." The bikers mounted their bikes, the engines rumbling to life as they revved their machines in unison. The sound was deafening, a constant roar that seemed to shake the ground beneath them. Maya climbed onto Jack's bike once more, gripping the sides of his leather jacket. The air was cold as they rode, the wind biting at her face, but there was something exhilarating about it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control over her life again. As they rode, the terrain grew rougher, the road winding through thick forests and rocky hills. The bikers expertly navigated the twists and turns, their eyes sharp and focused, always alert for any signs of danger. Maya felt a rush of adrenaline as they sped through the winding paths, her heart racing in her chest. She had never been so far from home before, but now, it didn't matter. She was free. The group reached the outskirts of town just as the sun began to rise higher in the sky, casting a warm golden light across the landscape. The old church loomed in the distance, its tall, crumbling steeple rising above the treetops. The building looked abandoned, its windows boarded up, but Maya could see the faint outline of a figure standing in front of the church, waiting. "He's here," Jack said quietly, his voice full of certainty. "It's time." The bikers slowed as they approached, their bikes coming to a stop in the clearing in front of the church. Jack turned to Maya, his expression unwavering. "Stay close," he said, his voice low but firm. "We'll take care of everything." Maya's hands shook as she gripped the sides of Jack's bike, her breath shallow and quick. This was it. The moment she had been dreading, but also the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't going to run anymore. Jack and the bikers had made sure of that. She stepped off the bike, her legs unsteady beneath her. The figure in front of the church moved toward them, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the man. It was him, her stepdad. He stopped a few feet away from them, his eyes dark and filled with anger. "You've got nowhere to run, Maya," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "You think they'll protect you? You're mine, and I'm not going to let you go." Jack stepped forward, his posture rigid with determination. "You don't get to decide what happens here," he said firmly, his voice cold. "Maya's not your property. She's free." Her stepdad's face twisted with fury as he took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You think you can just take her from me? I'll make sure you regret this," he spat. Maya could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. She wanted to run, to hide, but she knew she couldn't. She had to stand her ground. She was stronger than she had ever been before. Jack turned to the bikers, giving a subtle nod. "Ready," he said. Without a word, the group of bikers moved into position, surrounding her stepdad. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Maya's heart raced as she stood there, her hands trembling, but she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. This was her fight now. The silence was broken by the sound of engines revving, the rumble of the bikes growing louder as they formed a protective circle around her. Jack stood by her side, his hand resting on her shoulder, offering her strength. Her stepdad hesitated, looking at the bikers and realizing he was outnumbered. He stepped back, his anger turning into something darker. "This isn't over," he snarled, turning to walk away. But Jack's voice rang out, cold and final. "It is now." With that, her stepdad retreated, disappearing into the trees. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was over. For now, at least. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. "It's done," he said quietly. "You're safe, Maya. You're free." Maya felt the weight in her chest finally lift as she looked at the bikers around her. They had kept their promise. She was safe. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple as the bikers gathered around the campfire. Maya stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes lost in the firelight, her mind still reeling from the confrontation with her stepdad. It had been a tense moment, but with Jack and the rest of the bikers by her side, she had felt a strength she had never known. The fear that had once controlled her now felt distant, almost like a memory she could barely grasp. She wasn't running anymore. She was no longer that scared girl hiding in the shadows. Maya turned toward the fire, the warmth on her skin soothing her as she took a deep breath. She had made it through, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe she could finally find peace. Jack, always the steady presence, stood beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon as the others settled in around the fire. The night had fallen quiet, and the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the occasional murmur from the bikers as they spoke amongst themselves. Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had never been in a place like this before, safe, protected, surrounded by people who cared about her. It was a far cry from the life she had known, the life of constant fear and isolation. But now, here with the bikers, she felt like she was finally a part of something. Jack turned to her, his voice low and thoughtful. "You did good today," he said. Maya glanced up at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't feel brave, not really. But somehow, being here, being with these people, made everything feel possible. "I'm just glad it's over," she replied quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you guys." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "We're family now, Maya. You don't have to do anything alone anymore." The words, simple as they were, settled deep in her chest, a warmth that she hadn't known she needed. She had spent so long believing she was on her own, trying to fight battles no one even knew about. But now, with Jack and the bikers, she felt like maybe she didn't have to fight alone anymore. As the fire crackled, One of the bikers, a woman named Roxy, leaned forward, her eyes focused on Maya. "So what's next?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Maya looked around at the group, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She had spent years just trying to survive, but now, for the first time, she felt like she could think about what came next. She wasn't running anymore. The thought of a future, something beyond just escaping, felt both exciting and overwhelming. "I don't know," Maya said, her voice hesitant. I guess I've never really thought about what happens after." Jack spoke up before anyone else could, his voice steady and reassuring. "That's all right, Maya," he said. "One step at a time. We'll figure it out together." Maya nodded, taking in his words. She had spent so much of her life trying to escape from the past that the idea of building something new, something permanent, felt like a distant dream. But maybe it wasn't as impossible as it once seemed. The night stretched on, and the fire continued to burn brightly, the flames dancing in the cool mountain air. As the bikers relaxed around the campfire, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the first time in a long while. She had found something here, something she hadn't known she was looking for. A family, a place where she could belong. As the stars filled the sky, Maya allowed herself to dream, just for a moment. She thought about the future, what it might hold. She didn't know exactly what that future looked like, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to face it alone. With Jack and the rest of the crew by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. The fire flickered as the night grew deeper, and Maya's thoughts drifted to the possibilities ahead. She had come so far, and for the first time, she could see a path forward. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And with that thought, she finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But she wasn't facing them alone. She was ready to face whatever came next, with the bikers by her side. The day had finally come. The calm they had found in the mountains was over. The bikers were on high alert, their eyes scanning every shadow, every curve of the road ahead. Jack had sensed that it was only a matter of time before her stepdad would try again, and today, it seemed like the moment had arrived. Maya stood beside him, her nerves tight, her heart thumping in her chest. For the first time since she had joined the crew, she didn't feel fear for herself, but for the bikers. They had come so far to protect her, and now it was her turn to stand strong. They were no longer just running, they were fighting back. Jack's voice cut through her thoughts as he turned to the group, his tone sharp but reassuring. "We're ready for this. Keep your eyes open, stay sharp, and remember, we stick together. Maya, we've got your back." Maya nodded, her breath shaky but determined. She had come to understand what it meant to belong to this group. They weren't just bikers. These were her protectors, her family, and she couldn't let them down. The sound of distant engines reached them, faint at first but growing louder, and Jack's expression hardened. "He's here," he said quietly. Maya's heart skipped. Her stepdad had finally caught up. "Let's get in position," Jack said, and without another word, the crew moved into action. Each biker knew their role, moving with practiced ease, setting up a perimeter around the camp. Maya felt the rush of adrenaline surge through her as they worked. This was it. She wasn't going to be the helpless girl she had once been, hiding in the shadows. She had a purpose now, and she wasn't about to let fear control her. The camp was silent. The only sounds were the rustling of the trees and the occasional murmur from the bikers. Maya stood behind Jack, watching as the group positioned themselves, each one focused and calm. Her stepdad's car had to be close now. The engines were unmistakable. She could feel it, the weight of the moment, the truth that was about to unfold. As the sound of the engines grew louder, Maya's eyes scanned the road, waiting. It didn't take long for them to see the headlights. Her stepdad's car slowly crested the hill, and Jack's gaze flicked to Maya. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low. Maya nodded. "Let's do this." The car pulled up slowly, stopping a few feet away from the group. The engine cut off, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of wind through the trees. Then, the door creaked open, and her stepdad stepped out. He was exactly as she remembered him, cold, distant, and angry. His eyes locked on Maya immediately, and she could see the fury burning behind them. "You think you can hide from me forever?" he spat, his voice full of venom. Jack stepped forward, his posture firm, but his expression calm. "You've got no claim here," he said. "Maya is free. You're not going to hurt her again." Her stepdad's lip curled into a sneer as he stepped closer, his hands balling into fists. "She's my daughter," he snarled. "I don't care what you think you've built here. She belongs with me." Maya felt a shiver run through her, but she refused to back down. She stood tall, looking directly at him. "I don't belong to you," she said, her voice steady but strong. "I'm not your property. I never was." For a moment, there was silence. Her stepdad looked like he might lash out, but Jack took a step forward, his hand raised, as though warning him. "If you want to make this a fight, you're going to lose," Jack said, his voice low and deadly calm. Her stepdad hesitated, his eyes flicking to the bikers who had closed in around him. He was outnumbered, and the realization seemed to dawn on him. "This isn't over," he growled, turning toward his car. "I'll make sure you regret this." "Not if you don't leave now," Jack shot back, his voice hard. The tension in the air was thick, but Maya could see the fear starting to creep into her stepdad's eyes. He knew this was a fight he couldn't win. With a final glare at Maya, he turned and stalked back to his car. The engine roared back to life, and the car sped off, leaving nothing behind but the dust in the air. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It was over. For now. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. "You did great," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You stood your ground." Maya swallowed, her heart still racing. "I'm not running anymore," she said quietly. "I won't let him win." Jack nodded, a proud smile on his face. "You've come a long way, Maya. We've got your back, always." The rest of the bikers gathered around, their expressions full of support and respect. They hadn't just protected her, they had helped her find her own strength. And for the first time, Maya realized something important. This was her life now. Not one of fear, but of fighting for what was right. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. The bikers climbed onto their bikes, the engines roaring to life once more. Maya climbed onto Jack's bike, feeling the familiar vibrations beneath her. As they began to ride again, the road ahead seemed different. It wasn't just another escape. It was a path forward. She had made it through, and now, with the bikers by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. The sound of the motorcycles reverberated through the mountains as Jack and the rest of the crew rode along the winding road. Maya sat behind Jack, her hands gripping his jacket as they descended from the hills toward the small town below. The weight of the past few days had settled on her, but there was something else now, something stronger, a sense of purpose. As they neared the town, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow on the dusty streets. The bikers slowed, their engines rumbling quietly as they approached the edge of the town. Maya could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. This wasn't just another stop. It was the moment when they would put everything on the line. Jack glanced back at her, his expression serious but reassuring. "You ready?" he asked. Maya nodded, though her heart was pounding. She had been running for so long, and now, with the bikers by her side, she felt like she was finally taking control of her own fate. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. They pulled into the town and parked their bikes in an empty lot near a small diner. The place was quiet, almost eerie in its stillness. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting. Maya got off the bike, her legs stiff from the ride. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as Jack approached the others. They were all gathered around, speaking in low voices. Maya couldn't make out what they were saying, but she could tell it was serious. Jack turned to her after a moment. "We're going to make sure you're safe," he said. "We're not leaving until we've taken care of everything." Maya looked around at the bikers, the people who had become her family in such a short time. She had never imagined she would find herself here, standing in the middle of a strange town, surrounded by strangers who had become her protectors. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Jack walked toward the diner, his boots echoing on the pavement. Maya followed closely behind, her steps slow but sure. The door creaked open, and they entered the diner, the bell above the door jingling as they stepped inside. The place was small, with a few booths scattered around and a counter in the back. A woman behind the counter looked up as they entered, her face friendly but cautious. "Can I help you folks?" she asked. Jack smiled and nodded. "We're just passing through," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We need some information." The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. She glanced over at the bikers standing outside, then back at Jack. What kind of information are you looking for? She asked. Jack didn't hesitate. We're looking for someone, he said. A man who's been causing trouble around here. We need to know where we can find him. The woman's expression changed slightly, a flicker of recognition passing through her eyes. I might know who you're talking about, she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. There's a guy who's been asking about a girl, some kid. He's been causing a lot of trouble. He's been around here a few times, and I know he's been looking for her. Maya's heart skipped in her chest. She didn't need to ask who the woman was talking about. It was her stepdad. The woman's eyes softened as she looked at Maya. I don't know exactly where he's staying, she said, but I've seen him at the old gas station down the road. He usually hangs out there, talking to some shady characters. Jack's jaw tightened, but he gave the woman a grateful nod. Thank you, he said, turning to Maya. We're going to take care of this. Maya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined it would come to this, to a showdown with her stepdad in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by strangers who had become her family. But now, standing in the diner with the bikers at her back, she felt something she hadn't felt before, strength. Jack motioned for the group to follow him, and they all filed out of the diner, their boots thudding on the ground as they headed toward the gas station. Maya walked beside Jack, her mind focused, determined. She wasn't running anymore. As they reached the gas station, the place was just as quiet as the rest of the town. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the empty lot. Jack raised a hand, signaling the others to spread out. Maya stood next to him, her body tense with anticipation. They all knew this was it. There was no turning back now. Jack turned to Maya, his expression softening. We're going to handle this, he said, his voice low. You don't have to worry. We've got your back. Maya nodded, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her chest. The tension in the air was thick, but she stood taller now, stronger than she had ever been before. She wasn't going to let fear control her. She wasn't going to let her stepdad take anything else from her. This was her moment. This was her fight. The sound of footsteps in the distance reached their ears, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. They were getting closer. It was time. The sound of footsteps grew louder as Maya and the bikers stood silently, waiting. The gas station was eerily quiet, the flickering lights casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Jack's hand rested on the handle of his bike, his eyes scanning the distance. The tension in the air was palpable, but Maya felt a calmness within her she hadn't known before. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The moment had arrived. Her stepdad was here, and she was going to face him. There would be no more running. No more hiding. Jack turned to Maya, his eyes softening as he saw the determination in her face. Stay close, he said, his voice low but reassuring. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of his words, the promise of protection and strength. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a family now. As the sound of a car engine reached their ears, Maya's heart raced. It was him. Her stepdad's car slowly pulled into the lot, the headlights cutting through the night. The engine cut off, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. The door opened, and her stepdad stepped out, his tall frame looming in the darkness. His eyes locked on Maya immediately, and she could see the fury burning in them. He had found her, and he was determined to take her back. You think you can run forever? He sneered, taking a step toward her. His voice was cold, cutting through the night air. Maya's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't flinch. She stood tall, her feet planted firmly on the ground. I'm not running anymore, she said, her voice steady, her words carrying a strength she hadn't known she had. Her stepdad's lip curled into a snarl. You think you're safe with them? They can't protect you forever, he spat, looking at the bikers surrounding him. Jack stepped forward, his posture unwavering. Maya's not your property, he said, his voice cold but filled with conviction. She's free, and we're not letting you take her. For a moment, her stepdad just stared at Jack, sizing him up. The tension between them crackled in the air, and Maya could see the anger bubbling inside her stepdad, ready to erupt. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was the realization that he was outnumbered. Maybe it was the calm, unwavering strength of the bikers around him. Whatever it was enough. With a sneer, her stepdad stepped back, his hands clenched into fists. This isn't over, he growled, his voice full of malice. I'll find you. You can't hide forever. With one last look at Maya, he turned and stalked back to his car, slamming the door shut behind him. The engine roared to life, and in a cloud of dust, he sped off into the night. Maya stood there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. Her stepdad was gone. He wasn't going to chase her anymore. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long was finally lifted. Jack turned to her, his expression softening as he walked over. "It's over," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You're safe now, Maya." Maya nodded, her eyes brimming with emotion. She didn't know how to put into words what she was feeling. Relief, gratitude, but most of all, a sense of peace. The fight was over, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't running. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled at her, his eyes warm. "You don't have to thank us," he said. "You did this. You stood your ground." Maya looked around at the bikers, her family now. They weren't just the people who had helped her escape. They were the ones who had fought beside her, who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. They had given her a chance. And now, she was finally free. The bikers began to gather around, offering her their own smiles and words of encouragement. Roxy, the woman who had been her support from the beginning, stepped forward and gave her a reassuring hug. "You're stronger than you know," Roxy said quietly. "You've come a long way, Maya." Maya smiled, feeling the warmth of her words settle in her heart. She had come a long way, but it wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about finding herself. It was about reclaiming her life. As the night stretched on and the fire flickered in the distance, the bikers gathered around, their voices low and calm as they talked about their next move. Maya stood there, her heart full, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it with the strength she had found within herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. She was free. And with Jack and the crew by her side, she knew that nothing would stand in her way. She had a family now, and nothing would ever take that away from her again. I'm sure you've heard of the legendary Hell Angels, a group known for their strength and loyalty, but have you ever wondered what it's like to be part of one of their stories? In these gripping Hell Angels stories, Maya, a young girl, finds herself on the run from a dangerous past, only to be saved and protected by a group of bikers who have each other's backs no matter the cost. From the moment Maya meets Jack and his crew, she is thrust into a world of loyalty, danger, and the unbreakable bond that defines the Hell Angel stories. The journey takes her through intense confrontations, facing the darkest corners of her past, and ultimately finding freedom she never thought possible. These Hell Angel stories are filled with raw emotions, showing the true meaning of family, and how a group of outcasts can come together to protect one another. With Maya at the heart of this saga, she learns to trust the bikers who give her more than just protection. They offer her the chance to rebuild her life. The Hell Angels stories explore the lengths to which these bikers will go to ensure no one is left behind, making sure that the dark past doesn't define who Maya becomes. As they fight off the threats that come their way, these Hell Angels stories prove that there's strength in unity and a fierce determination to never back down from the fight. The chapter closes as Maya finds herself free, no longer running, but ready to face the future. This is a tale of survival, camaraderie, and the kind of strength that only the true Hell Angels stories can bring.